I know something's got to change in this business, but no matter how hard I work, I just don't know where to start. At some point, working harder stops working, right? You're getting pulled in a million directions, especially as the owner. So from the outside, everybody's like, this guy's on top of the world. But at the same time, you're making it home late for dinner. And the level of stress you might feel might be kind of crazy. Today, we're going to go into the logic and we're going to remove the emotion. Well, your numbers tell a story. If you get stuck, just text me. Hey, everybody. How are you? Today, we're going to be talking about numbers. And, talking about numbers on a podcast or a YouTube video is a lot like talking about riding a bike. It makes a lot more sense if you just get on and ride the thing, right? So look, at any point today, if you get frustrated or you're not sure where I'm going with what I'm talking about, maybe you just hit a blank spot, just text me, okay? And we'll set up a meeting and I'll walk through you and your situation. I won't leave you hanging. The reason I thought about this and decided to do this as a show is because in talking to people, especially for some reason, just as we've come out of summertime, I find a lot of frustration. And more than I've ever heard before, people are saying, Dom, I know something's got to change in this business, but no matter how hard I work, I just don't know where to start. So if that sounds like you, I think you're going to enjoy today, especially if you're growing a busy shop and you just can't see yourself working harder. At some point, working harder stops working, right? So yes, if you're like other shops in North America, and of course in Europe and South America, who we talk to as well, you're getting pulled in a million directions, especially as the owner. And if it's a family business, you're getting pulled in 1.5 million directions. And if you're listening to the show, there's a good chance we haven't had a chance even to meet face to face. So you might be surprised if I take some random wild guesses at the parts of your business you might be feeling pulled in a bunch of different directions. So here, let me ask you. At some point today, when you had a second to yourself, did you think about any of these things? Did you think about people, the people on your team, the people you need on your team, the people you're having problems with, maybe the GCs and supers you're dealing with? So did you think about people? Did you think about processes or broken systems? Did you think about systems themselves? How much of your time today was spent thinking about cash or money or profits? How much of your time today was spent thinking about getting stuff done or family, especially if you have a family business? That's a delicate dance. Customer issues, sales, or profitability. Look, if you've heard even one episode or watched one of the YouTube videos, you know that we have a lot of tools for shops who already look like they're on top of the world. You've already got 5, 10, 20 employees, 40 employees. You already have nicely branded trucks. You already have foremen and estimators and drafters. So from the outside, everybody's like, this guy's on top of the world. There you are investing in new equipment. You care about quality. You get invited to the best jobs. You win great jobs. You'd like to win more of the greatest jobs, right? But at the same time, you're making it home late for dinner. And the level of stress you might feel might be kind of crazy. If I had to sum it all up, one of the things I've heard very often from an owner like yourself is, again, just what I said at the beginning, I know something's got to change. I just don't know where to start, right? Because there's just something coming at me every day. And if I do start on something, I get pulled into something else. So let's do that today. Let's draw a line in the sand. Okay, I'm going to simplify things. One of my jobs as a business coach is to simplify things. We're going to deal with logic and we're going to ignore emotion for a second. It's going to be a very logical meeting, or I guess this isn't a meeting, right? This is a podcast. You're listening on iTunes or watching it on YouTube. But I'm going to be cold, data-driven, factual. Those of you who know me, of course, know that I'm probably going to try and make a couple of jokes, but they're not going to land, which is totally normal, but I keep trying. But in my role as a professional business coach, I have to easily be able to toggle, switch back and forth between using logic and emotion. So today, let's just agree, we're going to focus on logic. I'm going to be reading you a report of a $5 million company who's losing money. How could you be 5 million and losing money? I mean, we know how, and I'm not knocking anybody for it. It's not by a lack of trying. It's because the effort's being pulled in too many directions, like we talked about earlier, right? So for a second, let's pretend that you and I are in that boardroom meeting. You're the $5 million business. We're having an executive meeting. We're in a nice private boardroom. The doors are closed. You've told everybody, don't bug us. The phone is off. We've got a nice clean whiteboard, a bunch of working markers. Wouldn't that be nice? Right? A bunch of working markers. We've got pens, paper, phones, bagels. coffee, donuts, whatever you like, hopefully some carrot sticks and celery, some water. But look, you and I are just going to roll up our sleeves and settle in, and we're going to get some work done today. Some people call it GSD. Today, we're going to GSD. And if you don't know what that acronym is, look it up on your computer and then, delete your browser history. Since we're already in dreamland, let's also pretend that last week you said to me, Dom, I know something's got to change. I just don't know where to start, right? So I gave you a little bit of homework. I said, look, can you give me last year's financials, whatever you submitted for taxes, whatever you submitted to the bank, and let me have a look at them. Now, remember, I'm not an accountant, but we do use financial modeling tools. Remember, I said we're going to focus on logic and not emotion. So I might say some things today that sound boring, but we need those established frameworks so that you know what to do first and what to ignore, right? So we need to look at those financials. I'm going to explain it to you. Next, we're going to do what we always do when somebody starts business coaching with us, is this report. Now, listen, I don't live in a bubble, and I also don't live in a fairy tale wonderland. I know what people say about business coaches. It's not my first trip around the block. I've been doing this for 25 years. Some people will say, look, Rubino, coach like you, come on, buddy. You guys are just motivational speakers. You never ran a real business. That is not true. And I'm not here today to talk about the businesses I've ran or the businesses I've sold or the businesses that the other coaches on my team are currently running or have sold in the past. That's not for today's conversation. Happy to have it anytime. The other thing I hear is, Rubino, a coach like you is just going to tell me how to work harder. Now, my job is to show you how to stop working so hard by fixing broken systems. You've already figured out that working harder stopped working at some point, probably a couple of years ago. And you can't humanly work any harder than you do. So something has to change, back to what we said at the very top of the show, right? And what has to change are the inputs. We're removing the emotion. We're going to focus on logic. In the military, they use a term and it's called a force multiplier. Some of you have heard of it, I'm sure. It's something that makes a team more powerful than their numbers would suggest. Sometimes it's better gear, sometimes it's strategy, but most often it's a strong leader. 10 soldiers with the right leader can beat 50 without one. And your shop's no different. Without leadership, you've just got a bunch of bodies swinging hammers and sweeping the floor. But with a trained foreman, your crew becomes a unit, a solid unit that gets the job done right the first time. That's how the military stacks the odds in its favor every single time. And that's what Foreman 101 is. It's leadership training for the people who multiply your results, your foremen, your supervisors. Think about this for a second. If you had a well-trained foreman, I'll bet you could finally make it home for dinner on time, right? Because your force multiplier is your foreman, and your foreman's tool is leadership training. Get on the wait list for the next free info session. Just text me at 206-208-7581 and say foreman training. We'll get you on the list. The other thing I've heard before is, coaches like you, Rubino, you just talk about goals and mindset. Look, real business coaching gets into your numbers, your people, and your processes. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, especially numbers and processes and taking action. Another one I've heard this from family businesses before. Hey, what are we doing here? This guy's just going to take over our business and tell us how to run it. This guy doesn't even know what he's never been here. He doesn't know what our shop looks like. He doesn't know our customers. Look, that is a completely valid thing to talk about. But a professional business coach like myself and the coaches on our team, we don't take the steering wheel, but we do adjust your mirrors. We do adjust your mirrors. You're still the driver, but we need to get you focused on the front view, the gauges in front of you. We want to get you focused on what's happened behind you. That's the mirrors behind you and the windshield in front of you. All right. You're still the driver. A couple times I've heard people say, Dom, I built this company from nothing. I don't need somebody bossing me around. I could not agree more. I feel exactly the same way. And I have a business coach. And really, we're not here to boss anybody around. We're here, and I've said it here today a couple times, we're here to remove the emotion from this conversation and have a logical discussion. From that logical discussion, you as a strong business owner, in this case, you got a $5 million business, losing $71,000 a year, you're going to know what actions you need to take, especially when you can see it clearly. I've also heard people say, coaching's only for failing businesses. Maybe this $5 million business, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Give your head a shake, my friend. He built a $5 million business from scratch. He knows what he's talking about. but somewhere the wheels started to wobble and somewhere the wheels have come off. We got to bolt those wheels back on and get this thing running again. We can never look at a guy who's built a business from zero to where it is today and think that he doesn't know what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing. He just needs to do some things differently because he's not the same business he was a year ago. This $5 million business is probably running like a $3.5 million business, right? Or your $3 million business might be running as a $2 million business. That's the challenge, right? Coaching's not for failing businesses at all. The best companies in the world have coaches. In the trades, and this is happening all around you, by the way, your competition or people you know in other trades, we all know other tradespeople, the best owners who grow the fastest are the ones who are humble enough to say, I don't know what I don't know. So let me get some outside perspective. And of course, some people say it's too expensive. I can't afford business coaching. Well, you don't have to. We're just talking. You're listening to a free episode right now. So hopefully it's worth more than free, but you already pay for coaching. I don't know if you know that. You already pay for coaching. It shows up in your balance sheet and your P&L in lost profit, in rework, and chaos. Coaching just shows you the invoice you've been ignoring. The good ones, the good coaches, we pay for ourselves in 90 days or less. As a matter of fact, if you don't get value from this episode, hang up and unsubscribe. Go to iTunes and unsubscribe. Go to your YouTube channel, unsubscribe. If there's no value, why are you here? You've got to be there to grab the value from me. And the value will be there for you as long as you take action on it. If you just listen and visit, don't bother. You're not going to get anything here. The other one that I hear is, look, a guy like you, Dom, you're never going to understand my world, But I'll tell you what, your chaos has a pattern. Think about this. I've run businesses myself. I've run failing businesses myself. I've failed. I've succeeded a couple times. That's been fun. But even for myself, my chaos has always had a pattern. In one of my family businesses, we had a pattern. We had a people problem like you wouldn't believe. And the people problem started with the stress that was between myself and my cousin, who was my business partner, right? Chaos has a pattern. I don't know what your pattern is because we may not have had a chance to meet yet. But the bottlenecks, the margins, the people problems, they're 80% identical from one trade, one company to the next. And you might also be saying, look, I don't need a coach. I just need more work. Sure. Let's put more work into a broken system that just breaks faster. All we're doing is creating chaos. Your business, if you're putting more business into a broken business, then you're really good at producing problems. We want to produce solutions, right? A coach like myself fixes a machine that runs the work, not just the jobs themselves. Anyways, let's get to the point here. Let's go back and remind ourselves today's about logic, not emotion. I'm going to walk you through a report we use. It establishes a baseline when we start coaching a new client. Now, we also use this very same report from time to time with our clients because we revisit these documents over time to make sure we're on track. There's no use having this and not using it. We turn your numbers into words, and those words are a set of directions. You're the boss. Remember, we were talking about you're still driving this thing. You get to choose which action we take and in which order. We're just going to lay out for you options. When you have a lack of options, when you have a lack of choice, you're forced to make bad decisions. It's the same for me as it is for you, right? I'm about to go on a big hunting trip. If I find myself hiking up a mountain and I come to a cliff that I can't climb up, I'm forced to make a decision. I have to go left, or I've got to go right, or I've got to go back. Now, what if the wind isn't right? What if the weather's not good? What if there's not enough time in the day? Now that cliff has forced me to make what could be a bad decision that quote unquote ruins the rest of my hunt. No hunt ever gets ruined, by the way. As long as I'm out there, I'm happy. But you see what I mean? I've now hit something that takes away one of my decisions. So I've got to make another decision. Do I go left? Do I go right? Do I go back? But going forward, it doesn't work. I can't do it. And it's the same thing in our business. When we don't have choice, we're forced to make a bad decision. And I don't want you to be in that situation. So anyways, let's turn those numbers into words and I'll explain what I mean. And by the way, your numbers tell a story. You may have heard your accountant say this before. Your numbers tell a story, right? And so let's think in our logical mind. I'll give you a real simple example so you know what I mean. We're going to use a silly number, right? Let's say that you sell kitchens for $10,000 each. That's a very low number. And your shop can produce one kitchen a week. So now you tell me what your total sales will be at the end of the year. $10,000 kitchens, 1 week production, 52 weeks in a year. There you go. Your sales are probably 520 grand. Now, if you're listening to this show, those numbers are ancient history, but here's where the story is. If your average kitchen is $100,000 and you do 3 kitchens a week, but you lost 3 kitchens because the CNC was down and 1 week because the finish line, etc., it tells a story. See, that's what I'm talking about here. So we're going to tell that stories. That's why we take your financials, and just like a big company CFO, and by the way, if you're not familiar with the term CFO, that's a chief financial officer. Just like a big company CFO, we pull the action items right out of those numbers because your numbers do tell a story. So I'm going to walk you through a $5 million cabinet shop and show you how we turn numbers into words, and those words or actions, they go back, and that's how I open the show. I know something has to change, but I don't know where to start. Here you go. Here's where we start. All good? And again, if you get stuck, just text me, but let's get to it. I'm going to turn here. So those of you watching me on YouTube are going to see me looking at a different screen because I've got the report's called Checkpoint 90 here at our company. But I'm going to be referring to that, and I'm going to put my glasses on, which is going to give a fantastic blue glare to everything we do here. But let's get into it. So here's an executive summary to get us started. This is 2025 year-to-date numbers. Total revenue of this company is $5 million, just a little over $5 million. We could call it 5.1. The gross profit was $1.488 million. So that's a 29.2% margin. We could actually stop right there, and we know this company has a problem because with a 29% margin, that only leaves them 9% of actual profit at the end of the day because, as you already know, your overheads are going to be in that range of 20, maybe even 25%. And that leads us to the net profit of this particular company of minus 1.4%. So they're in the hole 71 grand this year. Now, everybody got paid, which is good. The owner got paid. Everybody got paid. But that's the real numbers at the end of it. And remember, these are year-to-date numbers. So with this company, since we've just started with them, we still don't have them at that more advanced level that we like to get people at, where we talk about a built number and a sold number. Those are 2 different numbers that we track. That's a little more advanced. We get to that later. But here we're just talking about sales, not how much was actually produced and pushed out the door. And the cash position, the report is showing us weak liquidity. The cash position is 38 grand, so 40 grand on 5 million in sales. And you might think to yourself, and please don't do this, what's this guy doing running a $5 million business and not making a profit? It happens all the time. And it's not just a $5 million business. He could be a $1 million business and not pulling a profit. He could be a $100 million business and not pulling a profit, right? Even a $100 million business pulling 2% profit, that's a lot of work for not much return. And so today we're going to go into the logic and we're going to remove the emotion. There's no judgment here, none at all. We're just looking at the bare facts. So we've got these key points to give you a sense of this particular shop, right? Look, the sales volume is strong, but top line growth means not much if the margins don't hold. And so you hear us on this show, and you can go back and listen to 100 episodes where I've talked about the ideal client, where all of my guests have talked about, do we have the right customer and are we selling at the right number, right? If you've heard me on stage at different conferences, same thing. So that message holds true, right? Net profit, it's negative. It's negative. So we know we've got a problem, but this is solvable, by the way. All of this is 100% solvable. This is not a dead-end railroad track train going into oblivion. This is 100% fixable all day long. And as a matter of fact, that's what we do. We fix those kinds of things, right? So look, here it is. The numbers get turned into words. Here's the very high-level recommendations. Now, throughout the report, it gets a little more detailed, but here we go. Just as a first stab, here's the high-level recommendations. Cut overheads now. Look at your overheads, right? In this particular case, their overheads are double industry. So they're 2 times what industry cost is. Now, you might say, yeah, Dom, we go look at our overheads all the time. You know, I totally know what my overheads are. Okay, let's go look at them. Let's go look at them. Let's go look at them with a cold eye. And you've heard me say this on the show before. We just see the weirdest things. Things are calculated wrong. Who is included in overhead and who's included in cost of goods sold, that actually changes the way these numbers show up. We also see things like, and these are some very simple examples, there's a cell phone that we never attended to that we're still getting charged for 3 years later, right? So that money's just going out the door. We call those profit leaks. Maybe our overtime is crazy. Why is that showing up there? And now we know that we've got to go chase it. Maybe there's a software you bought, or maybe you're paying for 2 softwares, or, there's all sorts of things that come up. Everybody's overhead is different, but even those numbers tell a different story. And each of those stories gives us a list of priorities. And then sitting together as coach and client, we go, hey, which one of these is the biggest, hairiest, ugliest one? Let's go chase that thing down. And that gets solved. Think about this for a second. If you've got $300 that shows up every month in your overheads that's not supposed to be there, I'm going to use my calculator because I feel like using the calculator. $300 a month times 12 months. You guys already know the math. That's $3,600. But these guys run at a negative 1% net profit margin. I won't do the math for you, but how much do they need to sell at the front end to be able to get $3,600 if their net profit margin is minus, call it 2%? That's a big deal. So grabbing that $3,600 from internal operations has a massive impact on profitability. Massive impact on profitability. And like I said before, all of these profit leaks are like flagstones on a path. You just pick up that flagstone, right? You pick up that rock, you look underneath it, and you fix what's under there, and you put that down. Then you stand on that one, you go to the next. That's what we're talking about here, okay? Hey, are you following this show because you're actually looking for a business coach? Somebody to help you in the mindset, in the headspace of running this wood shop like an actual business. Well, it turns out that's exactly what we do here. Now, I don't know exactly what your big question's going to be. We'll find out. But the next stage of your business, I'll bet, comes down to one of 6 key areas. You probably have questions about time, team, money, exit strategy, growth strategy, marketing, or even sales. Look, if you're curious about how business coaching can help you, send me a text message. My cell phone number is 206-208-7581. Just say business coaching and start the conversation. So their overall financial health in this case is red. This company's at risk, but you can fix things. Their gross profit margin, again, and I'm reading from the report itself, sales are strong, but too much is leaking out in materials and labor. And I can tell you the stories that happen here. We got a lot of rework going on. That's why the material is high. And we've all seen the crazy things in rework, and how materials just get consumed so fast, right? In some shops, the engineering's not done right. We're not maximizing sheets. In other shops, we don't have good communication, right? And that good communication means we actually pulled the wrong product and cut maybe the wrong thing. We cut the wrong thing with the wrong type of product, or we don't have all the selections done. And so because of that, we made some guesses. Those guesses led to mistakes, or the measurements are wrong on site. Now we got to cut down cabinet. That's just rework. That's the stuff we deal with. And it's all solvable. I don't know, and you probably don't know either, what thing we go after first. But all of those can be hunted and run down and controlled. And that's what we do. But you got to have everything in front of you on paper so you control it. I think one of the things that you want to have is you want to have your goals written down. And you haven't heard this just from me. Anybody that talks about goal setting. What if we just heard here under gross profit margin? By the way, we're in section 1 of the report. Section 1.1. We haven't even gotten into the rest of the, how many pages? There's 9 pages of this thing. So I should probably pick up the pace. But imagine that was just the item there. And we turned that into a goal where we said, let's see, the summary is sales are strong, but too much is leaking out in materials and labor. So let's turn that into a SMART goal. The SMART goal is we need to get control of our materials and labor by November 1st. Okay, now there's a whole bunch of subpoints that come from that, but there's the action. Okay. And again, we are on page 3 of 9 of a report. Keep in mind, page 1 is a cover page. And we're only on point 1, subset 1. I can't read every single part of this report. And again, if you're getting frustrated or you need to see this, text me and we'll do something for you. But you see, we have to ask ourselves at all stages of this. You and I are in that boardroom, the big whiteboard over here. Nobody's bugging us. It's quiet. Finally, in your life, it's quiet. And you can just focus on the business. And we just ask ourselves the question, what's the core issue? What's the root cause right here? And what do we do about it? I've had these problems in my businesses. And one of my businesses, believe it or not, theft, internal theft was a massive problem. And that company, I was doing 120 million in sales a year. And internal theft was one of my biggest problems. I don't know if anybody's ever encountered that, but the people that I trusted to run the processes and the systems were stealing from me during the day. Craziness, right? So we all have different situations out there, right? All have different situations. Let's leave gross profit margin for a second and go to financial health, where we talk about cash on hand. Look, the cash on hand situation here is flashing red on this report. We actually color code things so that you can see where you're green. Green means you're above industry average. Red means you're below industry average, right? So all of this is benchmarked. If you're not familiar with benchmarking, we take the numbers from this company and we compare them to other numbers in the industry. So you get to compare yourself against your competition, right? Have you ever wondered, I wonder what my competition's doing? How do they deal with this problem? What does their business look like? Well, there's a report for that. And that report gets translated. It takes their numbers and your numbers, and all the data is scrubbed out, by the way. Nobody knows it's your numbers. Nobody knows it's their numbers. You just know that these companies are in the same industry as you, doing the same thing as you, and here's how they run their business. Remember, these are the same numbers that get sent to the government for taxes. So we're not sharing any information here. We're not losing any information. All the accounting firms around are putting this information in. It goes into a database. It gets translated and pulled out. Okay, that's what we use. We use accounting level information that usually chief financial officers have access to. And we have access to it here, which I'm very proud of. Let's talk about cash on hand. It's a very thin cash cushion. It's about 1 week of expenses. I can only imagine, I can't imagine because I've spoken to this gentleman and his team. It's a lot of stress. Everything's on a razor edge, right? We have a lot of reliance on incoming accounts receivable and deposits to fund operations. That sentence there is all logical, right? You would read that. We would read that in the boardroom and say, there is a reliance on incoming accounts receivable and deposits to fund operations. Do you want to know the crazy thing? The story behind the story? The story behind the story is this: the person in charge of their accounts receivable is probably the nicest lady you've ever met. She runs, she makes sure everybody's got a birthday cake on their birthday at the shop. She's exactly what you want to run a good shop with a good culture. But she is so nice and outgoing that it turns out the people she's calling for accounts receivable also can manipulate her. And as long as they're nice to her, they can push her off. And they'll say, yeah. I'm not going to use her name. Let's just say her name is, I was watching something on the Flintstones the other day. So let's just say Wilma. Yeah, Wilma, no problem. We'll get that to you next week. And Wilma's like, okay, no problem, Barney. Yeah, anytime you get it to me, that's great. Okay, good to catch up with you. How's the kids? How's the dog? How's the family? Great, blah, blah, blah. And she doesn't have that edge that she needs to say, hang on, we need that money today. And so think about the cash impact. And we've just turned this cabinet shop into a bank because now we're carrying that debt, right? Now, the solution is not to get rid of Wilma, by the way. That's not the solution. The solution is to have a better system for Wilma to follow and set better expectations with the customers that we get paid on time more often than not. All of that comes from the logic of the sentence that shows up on the report that sounds pretty boring. And here it is. What are we on? Page 5 right now. Under financial health, cash on hand. The point it says on the page is reliance on incoming accounts receivable and deposits to fund operations. But there's the action. That's the action, right? In this particular case, that's one of, I'm sorry, I apologize. That is one of the potential actions. There are many other actions that we need to take. But imagine that you received your money in your company 3 days faster or a week faster. And also imagine, and I'm going to do that thing where I look side to side before I say this, is your bookkeeper or accountant the kind of person who's really, really good at their job? And they define their job by saying, when we get an invoice, we pay it right away. You might need to slow that down a little bit, especially if you've got a cash situation, because the longer you can hold cash, the better it is. Now, we want to be in good standing with our vendors 100%, but there's a difference to us as well, paying it 3 days late. And yes, I understand what I just said there. Why do you say one thing on one side and one on the other? Because as your business coaches, we only care about you. There, I said it. Logic, right? So now we ask ourselves again, what's the core issue? By the way, under the cash on hand situation, there are There are 5 recommendations for action. Not all of them are going to work, but some of them will. And then it's up to you as the owner to decide with your coach which one makes the most sense, which one's going to give us the biggest bang for our buck, and what can we do as easily as possible to bring us a return. That's it. There's only 5, but there's 5. There's 5, and you get to choose. Again, the choice is always in your hands, but now you've got the opportunity. Remember, I was talking about in hunting, if I'm hiking up a mountain and I want to get to a great spot. I love hunting mule deer, by the way. Mule deer and elk and moose. Moose, you got to go down low. Deer and elk, you got to go high. I'm a very confused hunter. But, I get cliffed out. I get to a point where I can't get past that cliff. I've lost an option. I still have a choice to go left. And I still have a choice to go right, or I can go back. But look, I've just blown through everything behind me. So my scent is all over that. The wind is coming from my left. So it's pushing me to not go to the right. So now I have to go left. I don't have any other options. But what if left isn't all that good? What if it's not good ground to cover? See what I mean? When I choices are removed, I'm forced to make a bad decision. And for those of you that don't hunt, none of that made sense. For those of you that do hunt, you know exactly what I would do. I'll leave that to our own private conversations, right? We have another section here specifically on accounts receivable and accounts payable. So we get into that. And then we talk about debt levels, right? The actions are here. We even have a section in this particular report on depreciation, equipment aging and depreciation, and what to do about some of the equipment. And again, we're not here to make the decisions, but we are here to say, what's the logic behind that decision, right? We just had a conversation with somebody in the trade the other day, and they said, well, we've never used budgets, and we don't know why we would need to, but we want to grow by 20% next year. Well, let's just do the quick math and go back down the logic path. If you're going to grow by 20% next year, that means sales is going to go up 20%. Expenses are probably going to go up 20%. If you already know what you spend on equipment, we can presuppose what you can afford to buy for equipment next year, what changes you need to make. And so in that particular case, it's a husband and wife, and the husband wants the tools and the wife's like, why do you keep buying new machinery, right? But we can have logic behind it so both of them can have a really nice conversation. The husband can say to the wife, honey, I'm going to aim for this goal. When I've got this much money, we can buy that piece of equipment. Right now, what happens is the husband comes home and says, honey, I think I need a new tool, new piece of equipment. And she's like, oh, God, I don't know, we're going to pay for this. But instead, we can put budgets in place. And so when we talk about equipment aging and depreciation, it leads us back again to the numbers, and it leads us back to the decisions that you want to be making. So again, we're going to ask ourselves the same questions you've heard me talk about before. Now that we know what we know, what's the core issue? What's the root cause? What do we do and what do we not do? Sometimes it's just as important to know what we're not going to do or what we're not willing to do, and that's okay. Then we're going to talk about what the possible actions are. That goes back to GSD. And who's going to do it by when. The key to business coaching is we just shorten time frames. If you were left alone in that boardroom on your own and nobody truly bugged you and you had this report, you would have this list of to-dos and to-don'ts. And you would choose one of them. And again, if nobody bugged you when you walked out and you just went and implemented it, it would happen. The problem is reality of life is not like that. There's people texting us while we're in that boardroom and we're ignoring it. As soon as that door opens, there's 2 people sort of milling around outside waiting to talk to you. And life happens. And even though the report is valuable, you just get pulled back into daily operations, right? It's happened to me. It still happens to me. So I have to build systems to deal with that. When am I going to be the entrepreneur driving the business forward? One of the things I hope you've heard me say on this show before is my job is to take you to a place where you understand you're a business person who just happens to run a cabinet shop or a millwork shop or a closet shop, not just a cabinet maker churning out boxes and drawers. There's a difference, and that difference is actually just in your mind. It's just in your mind because it comes through the actions you take. Right? So that's the logic that we use to apply to that. Now, when you go and with logic apply a system, let's go back to the accounts receivable system. You can go to, what did I say her name was? Wilma. Say, Wilma, let's put a new system in place. And we lay out the system. And of course, as coaches, we've got these systems for you to choose from. But now you've got a reason, but you've also got a fire in your belly. I know that if I increase our days receivable, I decrease it, right? I collect our money 3 days earlier. I've got 3 more days of cash in the business. And this report tells you what the financial impact of that would be, even though the emotion in you tells you that's a good thing to do. The logic of this report tells you that's what you got to do, right? We actually talk here in this report about estimating and profitability, which takes us back to the end of job report. If you've never downloaded the end of job report, the EOJ, grab it from us. That's a tool you can put in place right away. That is a tool that just keeps on giving. As a matter of fact, it is also one of the fundamental tools we use with all of our coaching clients right away. Know your numbers, right? I know I like to joke around a lot. I know that some of my jokes aren't even good. I don't care. My job is to educate, inform, and inspire you. And hopefully I've done that today, right? If you find yourself stuck on any of this stuff, just text me. And when you text me, so that I know what you're talking about, just say numbers into words. And that way, at least I know what we're going to be talking about. You can text me about anything, but if you want to text me about this, say numbers into words. And then I'll know what we're going to talk about when we finally get on the horn. Okay. I hope you got a lot of value out of today. Remember, if you're in that situation where you know something's got to change, but you don't know where to start, it sure would be nice to have something in front of you that says, here's the 5 things you could do that have the most impact on your business. Mr. Smith, which one would you like to do first? Now you've got choice, right? And then when we don't have good choices, we have to make bad decisions. You're forced into it. You're always forced to make bad decisions when you don't have a lot of choice. So I'm trying to give you that choice. All right. So that's the summary. This is a $5 million. By the way, we've already made huge strides. You already know the accounts receivable system we put in place. This is a $5 million company with a gross profit of 29.2%, which isn't enough, right? But we've got to go get good data. I want good data so I can make real decisions based on real information. Right now, their net profit is minus 1.4%. So our job is really clear. Actually, you guys have heard me talk about this before, but let's do this here before we wrap up the show, this episode. We talk about revenue responsibility per hour. And if you are in a place where you can write notes, jot this down. Grab your pen and piece of paper and write down RR/H, your revenue responsibility per hour. That'll always tell you whether what you're dealing with is a problem worth solving. Again, back to the numbers. This is a $5 million business. And assuming he works 40 hours a week and 50 weeks a year, he works 2,000 hours a year. I'm laughing because yesterday I was on with a family business, family cabinetry business, very high-end retail store display specialty. And the son had just done 2 20-hour days, like Olympic level effort, right? You've got somebody with all the energy in the world to put into the business, but he did 40 hours in the first 2 days. Now, as you guys know, you just can't keep that up. And in your youth, you probably did the same thing. But you can't grow a business on that. You just get frustrated. Anyways, let me go back here. We're calculating our revenue responsibility per hour. So a $5 million business, just divide it, 5 million. That's 5 with 6 zeros. And divide that by 2,000. What that means is the decisions in this business have to get made at a $2,500 per hour level. So if you're a $5 million shop and you were listening to this episode, let's say this episode took an hour, and you didn't get $2,500 worth of value, then I ask you to unsubscribe from this show. Don't listen ever again. Don't come back. You're not getting what you need. You got to go find somebody else or something else. But I'm also going to challenge you before you do that, because as your business coach, I'm going to ask you, why did you not demand to pull $2,501 of value out of the information here? If you're just going to listen and do nothing, then that's on you. But if you're really trying to get information and you really want to change this business, then you're looking for, at a minimum, $2,500 per hour in value. And that's just at a $5 million business. Some of you listening out there have $20 million businesses, and some of you have $1 million businesses. Everybody's number is going to be different. But I take a responsibility to drive value at that level, and you take the responsibility to try and pull that out of what we do here. All right. I really appreciate you spending the time to come in here. Today might have sounded a little bit lectury. I was trying to be very numbers-based. As you guys know, I like to joke around. I love to have fun with what I do. I love what I do. So does my whole team. But I hope you got a ton of value, right? And you guys know, and I've said this before, but I can't tell you how much I believe it. I was just in San Antonio at the AWI conference. It's just so nice to meet people, face to face. And that's what I live for. I live for the chance to have an old fashioned at the bar with the people I met there. Hey, Richard, right? I that's what I want more than anything. So this podcast is nice. The YouTube is nice. But one day when you and I have a chance to have a cup of coffee or a glass of wine across the table from each other, you probably don't know how happy I'm going to be at that moment. I look forward to it. All right. Thank you for checking in. Again, any questions you have, just send me a text. We'll get to it. Have a great day. All right. Listen, we've covered off a lot of stuff. If you have any questions at all, just send me a text and say, look, numbers into words. Pretty simple text message. Don't do it while you're driving, by the way. But you guys know my cell phone number. It's 206-208-7581. Just say numbers into words. Say whatever you like, but you can say numbers into words, and then I'll know that we're talking about this Checkpoint 90 and how you can really grab the data part of your business and take action on it. All right. Thanks for checking in. Have a great day.